Between 1965 and 1973, the United States military spent more than $100 billion fighting in Vietnam. They brought helicopters, napalm, B-52 bombers, and the best-equipped infantry the world had ever seen. What they never figured out was how to stop a war fought with sharpened bamboo, scrap metal, and their own garbage. Number 16 turned America's own firepower against its soldiers with bombs the Air Force had already dropped. Number 4 was nothing more than a log and bamboo, but infantry patrols in the Central Highlands learned to dread it more than rifle fire. This is how the Viet Cong fought a superpower. Number 20. The bamboo caltrop, called a chong by the Vietnamese, was the cheapest weapon on any battlefield in the 20th century. Sharpened bamboo spikes, some no longer than a finger, were scattered by the hundreds along jungle trails, rice paddy dikes, and the edges of landing zones throughout the Mekong Delta and the Central Highlands. Patrols from the 9th Infantry Division reported stepping on them constantly during operations south of Saigon in 1967 and 1968. A single spike could punch through the sole of a standard-issue jungle boot and into the sole of a man's foot. The wound itself was rarely fatal, but infection set in fast in the tropical heat, and a man with a ruined foot needed 2 others to carry him out. That arithmetic mattered. One caltrop turned 3 soldiers into casualties. The Hague Convention's restrictions on unnecessary suffering were never formally applied to a sharpened stick, but military lawyers debated it more than once. Each spike cost nothing. Each casualty it created cost the Army thousands in treatment, evacuation, and lost manpower. A weapon that required no training, no maintenance, and no supply chain held up entire operations. Number 19. A clay pot grenade was exactly what it sounds like. A ceramic vessel packed with scrap metal and a small charge. VC fighters in the villages around Cu Chi and throughout Binh Duong province used whatever pottery was at hand, the same jars and bowls that stored rice and fish sauce in every rural home. When one of these things detonated, the clay casing flew apart in jagged, irregular fragments that no surgeon could predict. Unlike factory-made steel fragmentation, the ceramic shards were nearly invisible on an X-ray, which meant field hospitals in Long Binh and Bien Hoa sometimes spent hours searching for pieces they could barely see. Medics with the 25th Infantry Division documented these injuries throughout 1966 and 1967. Soldiers who survived the initial blast often faced weeks of follow-up surgery to remove fragments that only showed up after an infection started. The weapon had no serial number, no supply chain, and no manufacturing cost worth mentioning. Weapons conventions had no category for a clay pot full of nails. The VC never stopped using them because they never needed to. The raw materials were sitting in every village kitchen. Number 18. Tire rubber slingshot grenades sound almost absurd until you learn what they did at Firebase Marianne. In March 1971, a VC sapper unit from the 409th Sapper Battalion hit the firebase in Quang Tin Province using, among other weapons, grenades lobbed over the perimeter by rubber strip launchers. The strips came from discarded vehicle tires, French era and American alike, which littered the countryside by the millions. A man crouching 50 meters out could arc a grenade over a sandbagged wall and into a sleeping position without ever exposing himself to return fire. The attack on Marianne killed 33 Americans and wounded 82, one of the worst single losses of the war's later years. The Army investigated the breach for months afterward. The slingshot itself was never a precision weapon, but precision was beside the point. Getting a live grenade inside a defended perimeter was all that mattered, and a strip of old tire rubber accomplished that at the cost of materials nobody wanted. The VC had been using rubber strip launchers since at least 1964, and the tactic endured because it was too simple, too cheap, and too effective to stop. Number 17. The bamboo crossbow carried no country of origin and left no ballistic signature. VC guerrillas and Montagnard fighters allied with both sides used crossbows along the narrow jungle trails of the Central Highlands and the A Shau Valley, where a shot that made no sound was worth more than one that did. Reconnaissance teams operating across the Laotian border reported crossbow ambushes as early as 1964. The bolts were short, tipped with metal scrap, and effective at close range. What made the crossbow dangerous was not its lethality per shot, but its silence. In triple canopy jungle where a single gunshot echoed for a mile and gave away a position, a crossbow bolt arrived without warning and left no acoustic trace. Electronic surveillance, seismic sensors, and acoustic detection arrays The tools the U.S. poured millions into along the Ho Chi Minh Trail could not register a weapon that produced no sound, no heat, and no electronic signature. The Geneva Conventions never addressed the crossbow specifically. They did not need to. The weapon predated every modern law of war by centuries, and in 1960s, Vietnam, it was still putting men down. Number 16. In 1966, a 15-year-old boy in Quang Tri Province walked into a fresh bomb crater and came out carrying a piece of an American 500-pound bomb that had failed to detonate. He was not the first. The U.S. Air Force dropped more tonnage on Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia than all the bombs dropped in World War II combined, and the dud rate for certain munitions ran as high as 30%. VC and NVA ordnance recovery teams, sometimes children, sometimes trained sappers, combed the cratered landscape for unexploded bombs, artillery shells, mortar rounds, and grenades. The work was lethal. Many of them died doing it, but the ones who survived brought back enough material to supply an entire mine warfare campaign. By 1968, American intelligence estimated that a large share of the VC's explosive capability came directly from U.S. ordnance that had failed to go off the first time. The weapon that cost the Air Force tens of thousands of dollars to build was now being used against American infantry for free. No military planner had anticipated a war in which one side's greatest ammunition source was the other side's manufacturing defects. Number 15. The bicycle might be the most unlikely weapon in the history of modern warfare. On the Ho Chi Minh Trail, it was indispensable. VC and NVA porters modified standard bicycles with bamboo pole extensions and reinforced frames, and a single bike could carry 200 to 300 pounds of rice, ammunition, or medical supplies along jungle trails that no truck could navigate. The French had learned this at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, where bicycle supply trains helped the Viet Minh haul artillery into the hills and win a battle that ended French rule in Indochina. A decade later, the same method was feeding an entire war. Convoys of dozens of bicycles moved at night along routes through Laos and into South Vietnam, invisible to the B-52s flying at 30,000 feet overhead. The cost of a bicycle was a fraction of what it took to fuel a single deuce-and-a-half truck for one day. And when a bike broke down, the porter shouldered the load and kept walking. The U.S. spent billions trying to sever the Ho Chi Minh Trail with bombing, defoliants, and sensor barriers. The bicycle kept rolling. Number 14. Spider holes were one-man fighting positions dug into the earth and covered with bamboo, leaves, and soil until they were invisible from 3 feet away. A VC fighter could lie inside for hours, motionless, breathing through a bamboo tube, waiting for an American patrol to walk overhead. Then he rose, fired, and vanished back into the ground before anyone could return accurate fire. The 1st Infantry Division reported constant spider hole ambushes around Lai Kyi throughout 1966 and 1967. And during the Tet Offensive in January 1968, VC fighters emerged from concealed spider holes inside the streets of Hue and opened fire on Marines from ranges measured in feet, not yards. The tactic worked because the weapon was the ground itself, shaped by hand and hidden in plain sight. Spider holes cost nothing to dig, required no supply chain, and could be redug in a new location in a single night. No helicopter, no radar, and no listening device the U.S. military owned could detect a man lying still beneath leaves and dirt. You found a spider hole when someone shot at you from it. By then it was too late. What most histories miss is that none of this was random. Every weapon was designed to slow patrols, split squads, and force the most expensive military on Earth into a fight on terms it did not choose. Number 13. Tin can grenades were among the most common VC improvised weapons, and the irony of them was impossible to miss. American troops left behind a constant trail of discarded C-ration cans, beer cans, and soda cans at every fire base, patrol base, and landing zone in the country. The VC collected them all. Within weeks or days, those same cans came back as grenade casings packed with scrap metal and whatever explosive was available. The 4th Infantry Division in the Central Highlands documented tin can grenade attacks regularly after 1966, and the problem only grew as American troop numbers climbed past 500,000 and the volume of discarded containers grew with them. Field orders required units to crush and bury their cans after every meal, but enforcement was sporadic and the supply of American trash was infinite. A single discarded Schlitz can weighed almost nothing. Packed with fragments and a charge, it could wound or kill at 15 meters. The Viet Cong did not need a munitions factory. They had the U.S. Army's garbage dump, restocked daily, free of charge. Every resupply helicopter that landed brought more raw materials for the enemy. Number 12. The bamboo ankle snare was designed with a specific arithmetic in mind. One trapped man equaled 3 men out of the fight. VC fighters positioned these devices along narrow trails in the mountains around Dak To and in the ridgelines near the Cambodian border, where the 173rd Airborne Brigade operated during the bloody fighting of late 1967. When a man's boot caught the mechanism, the bamboo locked around his ankle and held him in place. He could not free himself, and the moment his squad stopped to cut him loose, they were stationary, bunched, and vulnerable to the ambush that often followed. The snare did not need to draw blood. It needed to stop movement, and it did that with a piece of bamboo that weighed less than a pound. During Operation Hump in November 1965, the 173rd reported ankle snare encounters on trails north of Bien Hoa. No international convention had ever addressed a simple device whose only function was to hold a man's foot still. The VC understood that legal gap and exploited it. The ankle snare was not a weapon of killing. It was a weapon of arithmetic. Number 11. In the Mekong Delta, where coconut palms lined every canal and riverbank for miles, the VC had an unlimited supply of natural camouflage. Coconut shell mines were small, crude anti-personnel devices hidden inside hollowed-out coconut husks, placed along canal banks, footpaths, and dike crossings in Long An and Din Tuong provinces. The Mobile Riverine Force, operating alongside the 9th Infantry Division in 1967 and 1968, reported these mines along the waterways they patrolled daily. A coconut sitting in the mud beside a canal looked exactly like every other coconut that had fallen from a tree. There was nothing visible to distinguish it. Standard minesweepers designed to locate metal casings passed right over them because the casing was entirely organic. The device was primitive, unreliable, and sometimes failed to detonate at all. But when it worked, the fragments of coconut husk mixed with whatever scrap metal had been packed inside produced wounds that were ugly and resistant to treatment. Medical staff at Dong Tam noted that coconut mine injuries carried organic debris deep into tissue, creating infections that required extended hospitalization. And there were always more coconuts falling from the trees. Number 10. The cartridge trap, sometimes called a toe popper, was a single rifle cartridge, often a spent American .50 caliber round, placed primer up inside a short bamboo tube and buried just below the surface of a trail. When a boot pressed down on the tube, the cartridge fired directly into the sole of the foot. The device almost never killed. It was not designed to kill. A toe popper produced a specific kind of casualty, a man who could not walk, who needed immediate medical evacuation, and whose medevac helicopter drew 2 or 3 other men away from the patrol to load him aboard. The 101st Airborne Division reported cartridge traps across Thua Thien Province throughout 1968 and 1969, and the weapon was especially common along trails approaching the A Shao Valley. Each trap used a single bullet that the Americans themselves had already fired and discarded. The Geneva Conventions had no provision for a single buried cartridge. The VC placed them by the thousands along every route they expected American boots to walk. Each one cost less than the thread in a bootlace. Each medevac cost the Army a helicopter sortie worth thousands. Number 9. Few trail hazards in the A Shao Valley were feared as much as the bamboo whip trap. A long, flexible bamboo pole was bent back under heavy tension and fitted with sharpened spikes. A tripwire, often stripped from downed U.S. telephone lines, held the pole in position. When a man's shin caught the wire, the pole snapped forward at chest or face height with enough force to drive spikes through the fabric of a flak jacket. The 3rd Marine Division documented dozens of whip trap casualties in 1967 and 1968 during operations in the hills west of Dong Ha, and the 101st Airborne encountered them regularly along approach routes to the A Shao Valley. There was no warning, just the sudden rush of bamboo slicing through the air, then the hit. Patrols learned to watch for tripwires at ankle height, but in dense undergrowth where visibility was measured in feet, spotting a strand of wire the width of a pencil lead was nearly impossible. The whip trap was ancient in concept. In Vietnam, it was still effective enough to change how entire battalions planned their movement through the jungle. If these weapons have caught your attention, a like goes a long way toward keeping this channel going. Number 8. The door-mounted spear trap was the weapon that tunnel rats feared above everything else. Inside the tunnel complexes around Cu Chi, the VC positioned sharpened bamboo spears behind concealed doors and trapdoors at the junctions between sections. When a man pushed through a narrow doorway in total darkness, the mechanism drove a spear forward into his chest or abdomen. Tunnel rats from the 1st and 25th Infantry Divisions learned through hard experience to check every doorway with a flashlight and a bayonet before committing their bodies through. Sergeant Robert Batten of the 1st Engineers described the Cu Chi tunnels in 1967 as a place where every surface, every wall, and every door might be designed to kill you. The spears were cut from the same bamboo that grew directly above the tunnels. The doors were scrap wood and salvaged hinges. The whole apparatus defended a position that a platoon might otherwise have entered without resistance. In a space too small to swing a rifle, a sharpened bamboo spear was worth more than any firearm. The tunnel rats understood that, and the VC who set the traps knew they understood it. Number 7. Scrap pipe rockets were crude, wildly inaccurate, and effective enough to matter. VC workshops hidden deep in the jungle assembled crude launch tubes from salvaged metal pipe, and the rockets themselves used whatever propellant and explosive material could be sourced from captured or recovered munitions. During the siege of Khe Sanh in early 1968, NVA and VC forces supplemented their regular 122mm rocket barrages with improvised pipe rockets that the Marines stationed on the hilltop outpost could neither predict nor track on radar. The explosions were irregular and the trajectories were wild, which made them more terrifying than accurate fire because a man in a foxhole could not calculate where the next round would land or when it would come. Captain William Dabney, commanding a Marine rifle company on Hill 881 South during the siege, later described the bombardment as a kind of lottery that nobody wanted to win. The rockets were assembled from materials that had been abandoned or discarded. They were not precision weapons and did not need to be. A factory-made rocket and a scrap pipe rocket produced the same result when they both landed in the same trench. Number 6. On the rivers of the Mekong Delta, the VC fought a different kind of improvised war. Floating mines were concealed inside coconut husks, wooden crates, and tangled clumps of river vegetation, then released upstream to drift silently toward American and South Vietnamese patrol boats on routine patrol. Task Force 116, the Brown Water Navy, patrolled the Bassac and Mai Tho rivers from 1967 through 1969 and reported floating mine encounters with grim regularity. The PBR crews learned to watch the water surface for anything that moved against the current or sat too low in the water. But on a river choked with fallen branches and rotting vegetation, everything looked suspicious, and nothing could be confirmed until it was too close. A floating coconut husk carrying a pressure detonator was indistinguishable from the thousands of coconuts that fell into the water every day. Each mine cost almost nothing. Each PBR it threatened was worth roughly $200,000 and carried a crew of 4 men. The Navy developed countermeasures, nets and watch procedures, and hull reinforcements, but the mines kept coming because the materials to make them were free and infinite. Number 5. Punji stake pits are the most widely recognized VC trap, and for good reason. Concealed pits, sometimes 3 feet deep, were lined with sharpened bamboo stakes angled inward so that a foot could go in but could not easily pull free. American units across all 4 core tactical zones reported Punji casualties from 1962 through 1971. The 25th Infantry Division near Cu Chi documented that Punji pits accounted for a significant share of non-combat injuries in their area. The stakes were sometimes contaminated with substances designed to promote infection, a practice that drew condemnation under international humanitarian law, though enforcement in the jungle was impossible. A Punji pit took no effort to prepare and nothing to maintain. Once dug and concealed beneath a layer of leaves and brush, it waited indefinitely. It did not need to be aimed, reloaded, or supervised. It occupied the ground and punished anyone who stepped wrong. Engineers with the 1st Cavalry Division in Binh Dinh Province reported clearing Punji pits from trails that had been swept clean only the previous day. The VC replaced them overnight every night for as long as the war lasted. Number 4. Along the narrow ridgeline trails west of Pleiku, where the 4th Infantry Division patrolled through some of the densest jungle in the Central Highlands, a weapon waited that had no name in any manual. It was a heavy log studded with metal spikes and suspended by vine rope from the canopy canopy above the trail. A tripwire held it in place. When a man's boot caught the wire, the log swung in a wide, fast arc across the trail at waist or chest height with the momentum of 100 pounds of hardwood. Patrols called it a mace, though the VC never gave it an official designation. The impact was immediate and devastating, and the men who survived the first swing often triggered secondary traps positioned along the escape routes on either side of the trail, where panicked soldiers would naturally dive for cover. The 4th Infantry Division's after-action reports from the Play Trap Valley in 1967 describe mace trap ambushes that halted entire patrols. The weapon was gravity, momentum, and sharpened bamboo. It predated gunpowder by thousands of years, and in 1967 it was still stopping a modern army cold. Number 3. The tiger pit was the punji trap's larger, angrier relative. Dug wide and deep enough to swallow a Jeep or an M113 armored personnel carrier whole, the tiger pit was concealed with a bamboo lattice, a thin layer of soil, and living vegetation until the road surface looked no different from the ground around it. When a 2.5-ton truck drove over one at speed, the earth simply vanished beneath it. ARVN forces and their U.S. advisors in the 3rd Corps tactical area reported vehicle losses to tiger pits throughout the early and mid-1960s, and the traps remained effective into 1969 and beyond. Route clearance patrols with the 1st Cavalry Division in Binh Dinh Province found tiger pits on roads that had been swept clean the day before. The VC could dig one in a single night, camouflage it before dawn, and be miles away by the time the first convoy rolled through in the morning. No amount of armor plating mattered when the ground itself gave way. A machine that cost the U.S. government $40,000 could be destroyed by a hole in the road that cost nothing to dig. Number 2. Beneath Cu Chi, the tunnel complexes were not just places to hide, they were weapons. Stretching for well over 150 miles by some estimates, the tunnels housed hospitals, command posts, ammunition storage, and living quarters, all directly beneath the feet of the 25th Infantry Division, which built its base camp on top of the network without knowing it for months. When tunnel rats finally went underground armed with flashlights and pistols, they found a world engineered to kill them at every step. Trapdoors opened into spike-lined pits. False floors collapsed without warning. Dead-end passages funneled intruders toward concealed fighting positions manned by VC fighters who knew every turn. Sergeant Bill Wilson, one of the first tunnel rats to enter the Cu Chi system in early 1966, described it as fighting in a space the size of a coffin against an enemy who had built the coffin. The tunnels were dug with hand tools, reinforced with bamboo, and ventilated through hollowed termite mounds. They embodied the VC's philosophy. Take the ground the enemy stands on, use whatever you have, and make every advantage he brought count for nothing. Number 1. The most devastating improvised weapon the Viet Cong ever fielded was also the one that cost them the least. Command-detonated roadside bombs were assembled from unexploded American ordnance, artillery shell casings, mortar rounds, and scrap metal salvaged from crashed aircraft and destroyed vehicles. The triggering systems used batteries scavenged from abandoned equipment and wire stripped from downed communication lines. These bombs were buried in culverts, hidden beneath roads, and positioned along bridges from the Mekong Delta to the mountain passes below. The DMZ MACV classified the command-detonated mine as the single greatest casualty-producing threat outside of conventional combat. A single device could destroy an armored personnel carrier and kill every man inside. The weapon that cost the American military thousands of dollars to manufacture was being returned to its makers in a form they never intended, for almost nothing. The VC did not need factories, supply ships, or foreign aid. They walked the cratered landscape the American military had already bombed and picked up what was left. And the U.S. Army, with all its technology, all its firepower, and all its money, never found a reliable way to stop it. 20 weapons, all forbidden or condemned. Everyone built from bamboo, scrap metal, rubber, clay, or American garbage. Together they tell a story that no amount of spending could rewrite. The Viet Cong fought the most powerful military on earth with what the jungle provided and what that military threw away year after year, from the Delta to the highlands, in the tunnels and on the rivers. If your father or grandfather served in Vietnam, he may have known these weapons firsthand. Not from a list, but from the trails where the ground itself could not be trusted. If he ever told you what he saw over there, drop it in the comments. These weapons deserve to be remembered, not because they were sophisticated, but because they prove that wars are decided by the people willing to keep fighting with whatever they have. Subscribe and stay for the next one.